Chains under the burning sun. The Sokoto sun burned like fire on iron that afternoon. Inside the high-walled prison, where the wind itself seemed too tired to blow, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu sat alone on the cold floor of his cell. The walls were old, cracked, and stained by the silent cries of men who had passed through before him. Above, a tiny window allowed just a thin line of sunlight to enter, barely enough to remind him that the world still existed outside. His wrists were thin now. His beard had grown rough and gray. But his eyes still carried fire. Every night, as the prison went quiet and the guard's footsteps faded, he whispered to himself. Freedom may be delayed, but it cannot die. Sometimes, the silence became too heavy, too loud. It reminded him of the millions who once stood in the streets calling his name. It reminded him of his mother's smile, his father's trembling voice, the villagers that prayed for him with barefoot faith. It reminded him of hope. And hope was the hardest thing to keep alive behind iron bars. The boy with the water. One evening, a young prison aide named Sadi brought his drinking water. The boy was barely 17, thin, shy, and afraid of speaking too much. But this day, as he dropped the cup through the bars, he hesitated. Mazi, he whispered, why do they fear you so much? Kanu looked at the boy. Slowly, he stood and stepped closer to the bars. They fear an idea, he said gently. Because ideas don't die when men are chained. That night, Sadiq cried quietly in his dormitory. For the first time, he understood that prisoners were not always criminals, sometimes, they were sacrifices. The letter that never left. Kanu once wrote a letter with a tiny piece of charcoal he found near the wall. He wrote to his people. To the forgotten farmers. To the mothers who had lost sons. To the children who still sang his name without knowing his face. Do not hate because of me. Do not kill because of me. Build what I cannot build from here. But the letter never left the prison. A guard found it. Tear by tear, he destroyed it. Still, the words lived on in Kanu's heart. The night he almost broke. One night, sickness caught him. His body shook. Fever burned him. The pain was deep, and the loneliness deeper. For the first time, tears escaped his eyes. Not because of pain, but because of the thought, what if they forget me? In that moment of weakness, he remembered a voice from long ago, his mother's voice. If one person still remembers the truth, then the truth still lives. He wiped his tears, sat up, and whispered his prayers into the darkness. The day the prison went silent. Years passed. One strange morning, Sokoto prison became unusually quiet. No shouting, no chains clashing. Even the guards were silent. Then the heavy footsteps came. The cell door opened. 2 officers stood there. Kanu, stand up. His heart pounded. Was this freedom, or the end? As he stepped into the blinding sunlight, weaker in body but stronger in spirit, prisoners all around began to beat their cell doors. Bang, bang, bang. Not in protest, but in respect. Some were crying, some were praying, some were smiling. Because in that moment, whether he was going to freedom or to death, he had already won something bigger. He had refused to be broken. Final words. Freedom does not always come with open gates. Sometimes, it comes with an unbroken soul. And even in Sokoto prison, under chains and scorching sun, a man remained more powerful than the walls that held him. Dim moonlight slips through a narrow barred window. The prison is silent except for distant chains rattling. Nandi, mid-30s, thin, bruised, sits on the cold floor, back against the wall. His eyes are heavy with pain and memories. A guard's footsteps fade away. Silence. Nandi closes his eyes. Young Nandi laughs as he runs into the arms of his mother. His father watches proudly. Mother, softly, no matter where life takes you, never stop fighting for truth. She places a small cloth bracelet on his wrist. Back to prison. Nandi touches the worn bracelet still on his wrist. His lips tremble. Nandi, whispering, Mama, I tried. Nandi sits with Amara, his lover. They share roasted corn, laughing. Amara, promise me something. Nandi, anything. Amara, no matter what they do to you, don't let hate change your heart. They kiss. Back to prison. Nnandi's face tightens. His eyes burn with tears. A shadow moves outside the door. Nandi speaks passionately to a small group of supporters. Among them is Obi, his closest friend. Later, Nandi steps out. Behind him, Obi secretly takes a phone and sends a message. Text message on screen. They're meeting tonight. He's here. Obi exhales nervously. Obi, fearful. Forgive me, my brother. Back to prison. Nandi suddenly opens his eyes, realizing. Nandi, broken. Obi, a single tear drops. Nandi is slammed onto a chair. Blood on his lip. An officer leans in. Officer, your own friend sold you out. Nandi laughs weakly through pain. Nandi, then my enemy was closer than I thought. Back to cell present. Footsteps approach again. A guard appears at the door. Guard, you have a visitor. Nandi looks up, shocked. A silhouette of a woman appears behind the glass. It's Amara. Their eyes meet, pain, love, and unanswered questions.